Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Washington Elementary School District Governing Board meeting for October 22nd, 2020. Ms. Tucker, if you could do roll call, please.
Thank you. Governing Board members present. Governing Board President, Ms. T. Lambert. Governing Board Vice President, Mr. Bill Adams. Governing Board members, Mr. Aaron Yannicki, Mr. Larry Herrera, and Ms. Nikki Whaley.
Thank you. Next item is a moment of silence and meditation. I please ask you to keep in your thoughts and prayers of all Americans as we go through this difficult time with the election and the temperament of the country. It's very, very tenuous at the moment, and people are suffering all over from either COVID or just the unrest that is going on. Thanks. Dr. Stanton, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Yes, Ms. Lambert. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. If I could have a motion to adopt the regular executive session agenda, but I'd like board members just to take a moment, please, and review our board meeting norms. Everybody's emotions are very tenuous at the moment, and I just would like us to remember to treat each other with respect, to be able to have open and honest discussions. So if I could have a motion, please.
So moved. Bill Adams.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
So moved, Bill Adams.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Adams. Thank you, Mr. Herrera. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Did we get Ms. Nikki?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. And then if we can move on to approval of the October 8th, 2020 regular and executive session minutes.
So moved,
If I
Bill
could.
Adams. So moved, Bill Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I heard Mr. Herrera, so I'll go ahead and say the second was by Mr. Herrera. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
And it passes. Current events and acknowledgements. Governing board members, do we have any requests?
President Lambert,
Yes, Ms. Whaley.
I would like to, and I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, so I apologize, Dr. Stanton, if this steals your thunder, but I would like to just acknowledge all of our families, our students, our staff, our teachers who came back after the fall break. First of all, thanks for coming back. We appreciate you doing that. But also just, I thank you so much. It's been a tough transition as we're in that kind of floating back and forth between the metrics. And I know it's been a lot of work and a lot of hours trying to adapt to the hybrid and still provide the virtual or remote option. So I just want to thank everybody for their continued patience and their continued efforts, whether it's the staff, everybody getting ready for things on this end, or if it's the families and the students that are continuing to just kind of roll with the changes. So that's all.
Thank you. Are there any other board members?
Mrs. Lambert, I just wanted to acknowledge it's so nice to see all these pictures with, at least with the kids in school again. I mean, I know it's not exactly how we want it to be, you know, in a perfect world, but it's still better than what we've had. So it's exciting, and I'm proud of all our people coming back, and I'm hopeful. But I know it's been a lot of hard work. I'm really grateful for all the work people put in.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Adams.
I just want to echo my fellow board members in regards to the gratitude towards our staff and our administration, and just say thank you to everybody for a job well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Herrera, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I think, thank you.
All right, thank you. I would like to echo my colleagues' words of being grateful for our staff and our families. I know the kids are enjoying it. I've heard positive things. I know that there has been struggles, and it's like having a second start of the school year within the same year. So all the little hiccups that happen normally when we're just starting this school out and getting everything balanced. That's a transition that we're doing again as we move into the hybrid, and I'm so appreciative of everyone's efforts and their professionalism. I just wanted to share, I did have an opportunity this week to work with a group of students, high school and college in Berkeley, California, that they wanted to interview someone from the district about closing the achievement gap. And in 2000, I think it was 2008, we were mentioned in a national magazine of being one of the top 6 school districts in the nation that showed great growth in closing that achievement to the gaps. And they're looking at trying to work with schools and their state board of education and write legislation where they can to be able to do that. So I was able to talk to these students. They had great conversations, questions. It was a good conversation to be had. I was very impressed with them. And I also just want to thank the voters in our district. Right now, there's a giant election going on, and I have received, as I'm sure many of our folks have, about questions about board members and voting and dealing with that. And that really gave me a great sense of peace, because sometimes I feel that with voting for school board members, people aren't very informed because it's hard to get information. It's not like running for legislature or Congress, but people were really reaching out, trying to make an intelligent choice and vote for that. And that gives me great hope in how this election is going to run. So thank you for all of that. Dr. Stanton.
Madam President, members of the board, members of the audience, I do want to join in on the chorus of thank yous. Thank you to our classified staff. Thank you to our certified staff, our administrators, all staff. Thank you for the board, by the way, for thanking the staff. That goes a million miles, you cannot believe. And so we want to appreciate everyone for the return. It's been a tremendous labor of love with everyone. I'd like to thank Lynn, Lori, Paula, Amy. A bunch of us were in on Sunday working as were the schools getting ready for this week. I think one of the highest compliments we got this week was Debbie Halverson, one of our lead nurses, was on with Maricopa County Health. And they said WSD is going above and beyond with its preparation, and they wanted our board to know that. So I think you should just know that coming from Maricopa County Health, that's a pretty high compliment. Some of the comments I share with the board, but I'd like to share with the public was, I want to thank the administration for really being prepared. The online lessons are excellently written. Many things were well thought out and very thorough, and administration was cognizant of the needs of our staff, with staffing and other needs as well. And so I appreciate that. I think our team does too. We're not perfect, as you heard mentioned. It hasn't always been perfect. It's been a little bumpy. It's kind of like starting back at school. I remember usually doing this the first week of school, except it's the beginning of Q2. Thank you for dividing the students up 50-50. That was from a staff member. They really appreciate the precautions, and our teams were prepared. I share with the board, for everybody out there, we saw some tremendous work from the schools in their drop-off pickup. We saw tremendous work with food nutrition, transportation, social workers, nurses, health aides. Everybody was ready to go along the way. It's also parent-teacher conference week, so I want to thank all the schools that have already started the parent-teacher conference. Shout out to our translators who have been working an amazing schedule, not the easiest thing to do in a virtual world. So kudos to everyone there as well. And then just thanks to everyone for the flexibility, the grace, the love, and the empathy. Nothing easy here, but man, when you talk about the WSD family, this has been an amazing beginning. And so we'll give you an update later, I know, with COVID, et cetera, but thank you, Madam President, for the opportunity. And thanks to everyone.
Thank you. We're going to move on to public participation. Ms. Tucker, is there anyone for public participation?
No, Madam President, we did not receive any requests for public participation.
Okay, thank you. We're on to the consent agenda. Is there any items that board members would like to pull?
Didn't do it. I don't even think they tried because they had no chance of doing it.
All right, hearing none, if I can have,
Ms. Lambert?
I want something to pull. I'm so sorry. I almost forgot, Dr. Stanton. I need to pull the personnel action. So if we could have a motion for consent agenda A, C, and D.
So move, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Is there a second?
I'll second. I think we're tied.
I didn't hear the second.
Mr. Herrera's was first, I think.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Herrera, as a second. We'll go ahead and call for the question. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Any nays? Hearing none, then it passes. I'd like to go back to the personnel action, item B on the consent agenda. I would like to go ahead and make a motion that the governing board approve the personnel items as presented. Is there a second?
Second, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you. Dr. Stanton, would you like to take it from here?
Indeed, Madam President, members of the board, with the passage of that personnel action, I'll turn it to Ms. Mora to introduce our new Director of Educational Technology and Distance Learning, Teresa Hernandez. Ms. Mora?
Thank you, Madam President, governing board members. The academic services team is extremely excited tonight to introduce our new Director of Educational Technology, and we are extremely excited to bring Dr. Teresa Hernandez aboard. She's had 20 plus years in education. She's joining us from Colorado, and her last position was as Chief Intervention and Safety Officer, which is quite a unique position, and she was overseeing many different pieces of the district, from title to the safety team, and also really looking at those health services, restorative practices, and the social, emotional, and mental work that she was doing in that district. Along with that, she's been a Director of Assessment and Technology, Manager of Academic Technology, and also an Assessment Coordinator, and all of those positions were in the Denver, Colorado area. She has her doctorate in education, and she got that from North Central University, as well as a Bachelor of Science in Secondary Ed from the University of Montana. So at this time, I would like to introduce to you Dr. Teresa Hernandez, and she is with us tonight, so we'll invite her to say a few words.
Well, good evening, everyone. Let me be the first to thank you for the opportunity to get to serve the families and the students and community of Washington Elementary School District. It is an honor to be selected for this position and to get to learn more about your culture and your climate and the uniqueness of the WESD family. And having being on day 10, I think, I'm already feeling the love and feeling the uniqueness that having been in a few other school districts, and really enjoying getting to know everyone. Everyone has welcomed me with open arms, even being from out of state. So I thank you for the opportunity to serve, and I look forward to getting to know you all.
Well, welcome, Dr. Hernandez, and joining our WESD family, and we truly are a family. Thank you. We're going to move on. If I could have a motion to recess the regular meeting for the public hearing.
So moved, Bill Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Herrera. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So we'll go ahead and start the public hearing. In this public hearing, we have two items that we're going to be discussing. One is for the expenditure report for the M&O override, and the other one is about the bond and the capital improvement projects. Being that this is a public hearing, we welcome questions from the public. We ask that you go ahead and submit your questions, and but let's do it item by item. We'll do item A and then be able to ask our questions, and once those are all satisfied from the board and the public, we'll move on to item B and follow it that way. So I will turn this now over to Dr. Stanton.
Madam President, members of the board, Kathy Thompson, Director of Business Services, will be presenting at the public hearing the expenditure report for the M&O override funds.
Good afternoon, good evening to everybody. Per Arizona revised statutes, school districts that increase our budget limit through voter approved override, we are required by law to present an annual report just showing where we actually spent the money. For the M&O override, it does not have a special program that you have to code it to or anything like that. So it's all mixed in with the regular budget. So the report that we're presenting tonight actually shows the areas in which we put in the voter pamphlet, and then it shows what we spent last fiscal year and what we've budgeted this fiscal year. It's a very general, very simple report because we are trying to keep specific with the types of things that we have told our voters that we would make sure that we continue in our budget. One of those is our educational programs such as art, music, and PE. We might change the way we provide those services, but we, with the override, we were able to continue those services to our students and our families. Full day kindergarten. The amounts you see in this expenditure report are not the full cost of kindergarten. It's only 50%. The state covers the half-day kindergarten, and our override and community pick up the difference for the full day cost. We also told voters that we would include and continue with intervention services. So some of the costs that you're going to see reflected in the $2.4 million that we spent in this area include academic intervention. It includes behavioral intervention. Some of the, like our BSAs and our SSSs that provide services for discipline and things like that at the schools, and then some of our ASY stuff. We also have a couple of specialized programs that we provide, such as the Cardinals Academy at Royal Palm, gifted programs throughout the district, and some of the specialized programs. One other area that we had put into our voter pamphlet involved the fact that we would try to maintain our staff and student ratios. So every year we have a budget that we put out there in order for situations where we may have to increase a teacher or something because we have such an increase in student count. It hasn't been as largely used the last couple of years because our enrollment has not been increasing greatly, but sometimes we may not be increasing in enrollment but still have a need at certain schools. And then other schools may not be decreasing enough in students in order to move a teacher. Again, at the bottom of the report is just a general pie chart showing kind of how the override money is broken out and the percentages used in each of these areas up at the top. If you have the other column in this document shows what we've budgeted for this year, and the actual override this year is again about $19.2 million that is paid for by the voters that have approved it. So if there's any questions on this particular report, I'd be more than happy to answer those for you.
Mrs. Lambert?
Yes, Mr. Yannick, I do want to remind board members if you could let me know in the chat that you'd like to speak.
I'm sorry.
I'll go ahead and take yours.
Okay, I just have one question. The only section that's decreased is intervention services. I just wondered what maybe the reasons behind that, if that was a good thing or because we had less of a need, or what accounted for that difference?
Well, actually what happens in some cases is that we've actually changed some of the way we're providing some of those services. We also, some of those intervention services are paid for with title dollars in some situations. So it's not that we're not still providing the services, that there may be another funding source that helps cover that cost.
Okay, and that's what I figured. I just wanted to check on that. Thank you very much.
I have a question, Ms. Thompson. If I know that it has tried to go through legislature several times, but I didn't know if it ever got accomplished. Is the state back to providing funding for the gifted programs? And then this is, supplemental to that, or is this cost coming out of this?
For the last year or two, we have received some additional funding to help with gifted. It's not a funding source. We utilize that for like curriculum and stuff like that rather than utilizing it for our teachers because it's not a consistent funding source. I do not believe we have it this year. I don't have that right at the top of my head, but it's something that we've only got a year here and a year there. So we only use it for supplemental type of items, and we continue to pay staff for those programs out of our M&O budget.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Whaley.
Thanks, Kathy. And thanks, President Lambert. I was just wondering, as you mentioned, this is the money spent for the fiscal year 20. We're entering fiscal year 21, is that correct? Just so
Yes.
Because it's there. I'm just wondering if you anticipate using that full budget and what happens if we don't use that budget. As you said, as you mentioned, it might look different, with full day kindergarten, with some of the art and music programs. How is this going to look different next year? And do you anticipate using all of that money, or are we able to keep some of that money for the next year, given the first half of this year?
It is not a funding source that we can continue to utilize year after year. I do think we will spend it this year because most of the expenditures in this are staffing, and we haven't decreased any staffing for this year. So I do believe it will be utilized again. And as you can see in FY21, the cost of the programs actually exceeds what our budget is. Our budget is still at only like $19,200 for this year, but I think $19,266 for this year. And so right now our anticipated costs are pretty much exceed what the amount is we have in the override.
Okay, thank you. So it doesn't roll over year to year. So if we don't use this fiscal year, it's gone, but you don't anticipate that being the case because the majority is staffing, so
Yes.
We should be able to use it up.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Board members, any other questions? Okay, hearing none. Ms. Tucker, do we have any questions from the public?
No, Madam President, we have not received any questions via the Q&A, the live Q&A from the public.
Okay. Then is there any other comments? I'll give board members one more chance, and if not, we'll move on to the next item. All right, we'll move on to the next item. Thank you.
Madam President, members of the board, members of the audience, Kathy Thompson, Director of Business Services, in a public hearing will present the annual bond and capital improvement project update.
Thank you, Dr. Stanton. Again, as required by statute, the district, if we actually have proceeds from bonds that are paid for by our taxpayers, each year we are required to submit a public hearing report between September 1st and October 31st. I'd like to thank Mr. Herrera. He had asked for a bond report, but this is a more convenient time for us to do it because we've actually completed out expenditures for last year now, and it gives a more complete picture. And so I appreciate you allowing us to wait till this point in time for this presentation. What we have to report on and what we're reporting on tonight is any proceeds that we had left in last fiscal year. And while we had a bond authorization from 2010 of $65 million, there was a little bit of money left last year. We've had our final money of that since 2016. But again, with that actual bond sale, if you'll skip to the next slide, Ms. Tucker, you can see in here we've actually expended all proceeds effective June 30th, 2020. So not all of the projects that we had in there originally were completed necessarily. You will see a difference in dollar amounts from original projection to current budget that we actually ended up spending. What we had to do in this bond authorization is we had originally planned to use capital dollars for this bond plan. During the 2000s, we had major cuts in our capital. Therefore, we had to pull the capital money out of these projects and only depend upon our bond. There is still some capital that got spent before we started losing funds. So what that resulted in is some projects got deferred to the next bond plan. And there's a report I'm not going to cover on screen, but it is a report in there. There's a detailed report on every project and percent complete and any that may have gotten deferred or not been able to be done because of lack of the funding that we originally planned to use. Everything we could do, either we did in that project, in that plan, or we moved it into the next bond. So a good portion of the 2016 authorization include things that may have not been able to be funded in that original. But as of tonight, this will be the last presentation you will see on the 2010 authorization. We have fully expended those dollars and finished almost. If anybody is interested in looking at the attached detail report, it gives a lot of detail on how we spent it. The completed projects, we did 164 projects in that bond plan, covering a lot of various areas. we did renovations. If you look at that one large line there, renovations of buildings. So we did a lot of not major renovations, but some major ones at a lot of schools. And you can see we covered 38 different projects. So what we tried to do in this authorization is cover as many school sites as we could, however large or small the project might have been. So I think we did a pretty good job with that. Not every school got something really large to be done, but at least we covered some things at almost every school in that bond. The 2016 bond authorization, we still have authorization remaining for this bond. Voters approved 98 million in November 2016, and we've sold proceeds all except 21 million. The plan for selling that final 21 million is in early 2021. So within the next few months, we plan to sell the remaining proceeds from that authorization. The reason we do this in multiple sales is because we're trying to balance the impact to taxpayers. And we told in all the meetings that we had before the bond election, we told taxpayers that we would manage the levy every year that they pay for to where we would have no more than what they were paying originally. So that's why, while it might not please schools necessarily that we have to push out some of the projects, but it actually helps keep our promise to the voters that we said we would maintain, they wouldn't have to pay any more. Can't control what they pay individually, but I can control what I am levying every year. And we've been able to be successful with that. You'll see here we've broken out the reconciliation of this bond based upon the categories again that we had in our pamphlet. And you'll see after only 4 years, we have actually spent over 65% of that money. We've done a lot of work in the last 4 years, and we have a little bit more to go, but we, really done a good job of just moving forward quickly. Our facilities department has really expedited as many as they can. We are working, we will have some more bond. The biggest projects are probably near completion. You'll see building improvements are more like 76% complete, and that's only because some are not, Arroyo isn't quite finished yet, so there's still some outstanding on that. Technology improvements include a lot of classroom technology. We've had classroom technology out of both bond sales to date, and then there's still some more remaining in the next bond sale for later this year. We still have projects that are in different variations of construction in progress. The same as I mentioned in the previous report, there is also a detailed report that is available out on the on the board agenda that I'm not going to cover, but it details every project by every site. It gives you detail on the % complete of a project, if it hasn't been started yet, when it might be started. So that kind of detail is available on that detailed report that is attached to the board agenda. That information is also available on our website for people who would like to go out and look at the different projects. There's also pictures on the website of some of the projects that are ongoing or slated or completed. This is just a breakdown here of the different types of projects and how many projects were done. The furniture and equipment spread document looks like it's got 11 projects going, but those projects mostly are like the Chromebooks we purchased. It's the video distribution that's going in with the TVs at the schools. And in a complete rebuild, as we did in Arroyo, we actually go in and we replace their furniture and equipment for the whole school, because it's we only do that for the complete rebuilds. But at this point, that's a lot of the money in that furniture and equipment budget, the number of projects we have on there. If you go on, Mrs. Tucker. Again, this is the breakdown of completed projects by the category. And it doesn't look near as big as the other one did, but what we tried to do in here is focus in on the number of projects. We have some roofing projects we had slated. We have other projects we've done, but what we've tried to do, and you'll see later in the presentation, is that we've also utilized SFB, the School Facilities Board, to help us fund some of these building things such as roofing and air conditioning and things like that. So we do try to utilize other funding sources and free up the bond for any new projects that might come up during the process of this whole thing. This is just a list of projects by school categories and projects that we are anticipating at least a start of between now and like next December. Sometimes we aren't able to, like this last year, we had to delay a few flooring projects and things like that because we couldn't get them going with the procurement and things like that with the pandemic we had in place. These are the ones that we have scheduled at this point in time. You can see again, stage lighting and curtains. That was not one of our, it was a priority project, but it wasn't, we had to take care of some of the building functions and things first. These are now coming on up, getting slated to be done at almost all of our schools. Same way with the audio visual systems, the sound systems at the schools. Next page, Shannon. Again, other projects coming up. We have playground equipment replacement, some more new construction, mostly is just completing projects that are currently in progress. We have a concrete upgrade project with like the traffic flow and things at Tumbleweed. That is also funded partially with adjacent ways that the governing board has approved and is levied on taxpayers. So that project is utilizing multiple funding sources. We will continue the classroom technology and then HVAC replacement in different areas, cooling towers, and then in MDF rooms, our computer networking rooms and things like that. Again, these all are slated to be started or completed in the next year. There may be delays, but that doesn't mean that the project won't get done. We are also required by statute to mention any other funding sources that we use for capital improvements or equipment. These are the ones I've listed here. We utilize some state funding sources, some additional levies of taxpayers, school facilities board, and then grants if we can get them. You will see at the bottom the E-rate. We actually are going to be applying for E-rate to help us pay for a complete cable replacement district-wide. We have old cabling in place for our infrastructure for technology. That will help us. We're hoping to have that paid for mostly by E-rate, and then we will be able to have plenty of money in our budget for all of our projects. Next page, the two capital funding sources that we use from the state of Arizona are like I mentioned, the capital funding that we received. As you know, for several years, we get it every year based upon a per student amount, but those funds have been decreased for several years. Finally, it appears within the next year or so, they will restore that funding to us, but it will only be restored to 2008 levels. So we're not going to get any inflation on that, but at least we will get back what we had lost. You will see there that in the 2010 authorization, we used about $2.5 million of capital, and in this newer bond authorization, we've only spent about $1.1 million of capital funding toward major building projects. The other state funding source that we have used to fund building projects is the building renewal grants. We apply for them very aggressively, and over the course of this bond plan, where we have utilized taxpayer dollars for our bond projects, we've also helped supplement capital projects and some of the bond projects with building renewal funds, and we have gotten from the state about $2.5 million. And we have a few more that are out there with air conditioning we're trying to get paid for at this point. But those happen upon approval of the school facilities board, and they may or may not approve them, so we cannot count on it. But we have been able to get about $2.5 million for that funding source. I think the main things I'd like for people and the public to recognize from this presentation is that we are completing our bond projects as we promised them to the taxpayers. We're only selling our bonds as we need them. We don't go out and sell the $98 million and taxpayers are paying on it before they even get the project completed. So our goal and what we work at with our capital projects team is that once we sell the bonds, our goal is to spend the money within 3 years. That way taxpayers are paying for it, but by the time they get through paying for it, they've actually seen a result of what we did. We're also spending the bond proceeds within that short period of time that we talked about, and we're trying to get other funding sources to help supplement when we can, so that the taxpayers aren't funding every single thing that we're doing at our schools. And if there's any questions from the public or the governing board, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Mr. Adams, you had a question.
Thank you. Ms. Thompson, another great presentation. You and the team in the administration and district are doing an amazing job in regards to just the fiscal responsibilities of watching our taxpayer dollars and the returns that we're getting on them and how you manage them. So thank you very much for that. My brief question is, if I looking at screen number 6, it says that we've used 65% of our bond projected funds, and so the big question is, when do you anticipate going out to bond again?
Okay, we are working on developing the next plan right now. We've been slowed down a little bit with what's been going on in the last several months. I would think, we had originally talked about possibly within the next year or so. At this point in time, I would probably most likely be in 2022, because we're trying to develop it. We're trying to establish what that plan should be, utilizing our asset planner program and the condition of buildings. And then we still need to take time, though, to go out and evaluate and include stakeholders on those discussions. And I don't know that we can get that done in an effective way this year.
I'd like to say that is the perfect answer, and I thank you very, very much for your time.
All right.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mrs. Whaley.
Thank you. And this may be something that the people that are on the call may or may not know, but I just think it's important, and maybe Kathy can talk a little bit more as to why we go out for bonds and overrides. Because if you look at the things that we have the M&O, and we saw the things that money was going to, full day kindergarten, music and art, PE, some of the things that really are critical to most of our families in terms of what they expect from a school. Can you just give just a couple minutes of why bonds are necessary, and if we would be able to cover these things should we not have those?
Well, we have basically in our district right now, we have a program that we utilize to track the condition of our buildings and our land and all of that type of stuff, even to the point of even tracking the condition of our underground pipes for our plumbing. In that whole plan right now, our need is around $200 million. What we get on an annual basis right now is about, I think this year we have about 8 or 9 million that we receive from the state. So it would take us several years. That 8 or 9 million has to cover textbooks for kids, computers for kids, furniture and equipment, building improvements, everything. So just in HVAC alone, we have like, I think it was 24 million last time I looked that we needed just to work for air conditioning, to get our air conditioning up to date. We have buildings that have air conditioning from 1998 right now. So we don't get enough money from the state of Arizona to fund all of the building needs that we have. Our average age of buildings is about 40 years old. And you know what happens if you live in a home that's 40 years old, there's a lot of stuff that has to be done. So we simply do not get enough money from the state of Arizona in our allocation every year to fund it. So we have to ask taxpayers to help us do those building improvements that are necessary and the upgrades we need to do to our buildings. Again, we have about right now, about 200 million, I think 190 to 200 million in need, and at only getting about 8 million a year, it'd take us a while to even get that. And that's extreme need over the next 5 years. So it would take us more than those 5 years to even meet that need.
And in terms of how much we were supposed to be getting, because we were supposed to be getting enough that might have covered that, correct?
No, as I say, even when they restore it, we will only get about 10 million a year.
Okay, and so that's just I just wanted to clarify on that, because I think that's an important fact that there's just not enough money coming from the state. We don't want to have to go to our community and ask for this money, but there's just no money available to us from the state to maintain the schools at the level in which our community members expect, right? Most people expect that full day kindergarten is available to everyone. Most people expect that there's going to be music and PE and some of these other things that we see, but we simply aren't funded at that level. And so the bonds come in to help, which were supposed to come in to help provide the extras, but we've come to rely on them to maintain. Is that correct?
We have to have that money because there used to be a builder renewal formula that we received from the state, But it was in place for about 15 years, and of those 15 years, the legislature only funded it completely 1 year. Other years they funded it halfway, other years partially, like a fourth of it. And so that was helping us do some of that. It even gave us the ability to hire preventive maintenance staff to keep our equipment up and running on buildings, but there just isn't enough with it. And to do the things we need to do, especially when you're not an ever-growing district, you're not always building new buildings. And so you have the older buildings, and we're trying to replace a building or two as it becomes more expensive to maintain than it is to rebuild. But in each of our bonds, we've only been able to get the capacity to redo like one school at a time. So it's not a quick moving process for us.
Well, I just want to thank our community for supporting us in our bonds in the past. And I want to thank you for managing those funds and making it with the least amount of impact to our constituents, our taxpayers. But most importantly, making sure that we're getting those projects done in a timely manner, because if you've ever lived in a house with no air conditioning, you don't want to wait 5 years to get that new air conditioning. So I really do appreciate the work that you've done with that. Thank you.
We have a large team that, from procurement to MIS to the facilities department, everybody is really working hard to get the best deal for our district and for every dollar we spend.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to the whole team.
All right, thank you. Mr. Herrera, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. So Kathy, the 2023 probably will have to be going out for the next one, right?
Well, I think we would need to do that before then. Probably 22 would be my guess, is when we might be asking you for that. Okay. And then 23, we would sell the first bonds to get started and not have a gap in funding would be probably most likely what would be recommended to you.
And do you think that there will be an override before then as well, or in conjunction with?
We will be on that year, we will be in the 4th year of the override. So we'd have to consider it.
Okay, thank you. And then will this be the same on the primary tax and the secondary tax as it was for the 2022?
What I can't guarantee is what the rate is for people, because assessed values decrease and increase as we go through all this. What I try to guarantee to the voters is I can't guarantee you're not going to get a higher tax. I can guarantee that we're not going to ask for any more money than we did before. And that's how we manage it. We manage it to the point of, like, when we started this whole bond, the 2016, the annual levy that we got from taxpayers as a whole was about $15.5 million. This year, I think it's around 14 or just under 14, like 13.9. So we have actually decreased what we're getting every year in order to pay off our bonds. So I can't control what happens to their tax rate or what they pay, but I can control how much the district as a whole has to pay for.
Okay, and then the last one is more just a comment. Do we don't need another turn lane at Tumbleweed, do we?
A what?
That was an inside joke. We don't need another turn lane at Tumbleweed.
Well, that's going to be starting next year. We're going to be working on that whole parking and traffic flow at Tumbleweed. That's why it's a large project, and we're having to actually fund with some adjacent ways, and it's taking us a couple years to get enough on that so that we don't impact taxpayers anymore. We try not to impact them any more than they were the previous year.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Mr. Yannicki, do you have any questions?
No, I don't. I mean, I appreciate the detailed report, and I think it demonstrates that we do quite a bit with that money and the necessity for that money. So I don't have it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Thompson, the one thing I'd like to, I know this is a little, but in the PowerPoint, which was very well done, by the way, you do have numbers in parentheses on, I don't know what page I'm on. It's like, take for instance, the state capital funds and district additional assistance, and you have the 2010 bond authorization, parentheses 632 in parentheses. Can you explain what those numbers are?
What we do is every time we get an authorization from the taxpayers, we call it, that's the authorization, and we name it by the year that it was approved. And each time we do that, we have to track it in a separate fund. And that way, the 2010 authorization has been tracked in Fund 632. That's how we separate out which authorization is paying for what projects. And then 633 is the 2016 authorization. So we track everything by when voters approved it and how much they approved, because we can't spend more than they approve. And so even if we get, like when we sell bonds, sometimes they give us premiums, which are over and above what we need. And like we just journal entered $15,000 that we had received in excess proceeds above that 65 million. And we gave that back to the taxpayers into the debt service fund to pay off. So we can only spend what they've approved. And that was 65 million on the 632 bond.
Thank you. I just didn't want people to be confused and think that had to do with a dollar amount.
And next year you will only see a report on 633 because the other one has been completely, once the proceeds are gone, we discontinue the reporting on that bond.
Gotcha. I do appreciate this. This is pretty clear. And I appreciate the PowerPoint. And I'd like our guests to know that in the agenda, not only do we have the PowerPoint of both, but you have this very detailed report, and I thank you for not trying to put that on the screen and have us read.
You didn't want to go over 50 pages?
Well, that and in 2-point type, so no. But at least for folks that they're interested, they can download this and be able to peruse it and understand in a more detailed fashion of how and where the money was spent. So thank you very much for your report. Board members, last opportunity. Any other questions before I turn it over to the public? All right, hearing none. Ms. Tucker, are there any questions from the public?
No, Madam President, we have not received. Let me just refresh to make sure. We have not received any questions in the live Q&A.
All right. Well, thank you very much. If I could have, go ahead and have a motion to reconvene to the regular meeting, please.
So moved.
Okay, and a second.
I'll second. Nikki
Thank
Whaley.
you, Ms. Whaley. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Adams, for making the motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, then we will go back to our regular meeting, and we are now on item 6 for the COVID update. Board members, I'd like to go ahead and let staff go ahead and do the entire presentation. We'll take questions afterwards, but because of the length of the presentation and everything that's going on, please limit your questions. We'll do rounds like we did last time, but to only 3, not a lot of follow-up questions afterwards, just 3 basic questions, and they'll go around and be able to do that again. So, Dr. Stanton, I'll turn that over to you.
Madam President, members of the board, members of the audience, as we've been doing now since March, we've been providing a regular COVID update. We have been doing it by each of our functions. So as I traditionally have done, Dr. Bailey, would you please discuss from the school perspective the COVID-19 update?
Thank you, President Lambert, members of the board, and our viewing audience. I'd like to go into 3 different areas. Operations from before the fall break, during the fall break, and our first week of our second quarter. So before the fall break, we actually had 2 days of teachers actually preparing for our students coming back on October 19th. And I appreciate families and students being very patient with us, and they were online, and they had very interesting activities that academic services put together for Thursday and Friday. This really allowed our teachers to prepare for our students. That meant that they were getting their rooms ready. They were making contacts with their students. They were also, one of the most important parts was really training our staff on health and safety type of precautions and guidelines that protect staff and protect students. Also during this Thursday and Friday, our transportation was having some dry runs to make sure our buses haven't been running in a few months, so that they wanted to make sure that everything was going okay, and they were their routes were where they needed to be. That was before the fall break. Then during the fall break, most of our staff are off during fall break, but I will tell you that it looked like most of our schools were open because we had administrators, we had office staff, we had teachers in there preparing for our students. At this point, we were administrators and office staff and teachers were making sure that they were ready for the October 19th type of opening. Also, we were accepting changes. There were some families that wanted to change from in-person type of model to online, and some that said they were had scheduled for online, but they wanted to go in person. So the office staff and administrators were actually following through on those changes. We also wanted to make sure that our facility was ready, that our signs were up, they were posted the way that they needed to be. So there was a lot of activity during fall break. And we started right at October 19th. I want to thank our district office staff. They were out there helping and assisting in all 32 of our schools. Our students started in person and online on October 19th, and they were prepared. It was nice to see students on campus again in classrooms. All of us in the district office had that opportunity to actually greet our students. Also at this point, we are now in our parent conference time period, and Dr. Stanton talked a little bit about that. Translation Services has done a great job. We are virtual with our parent-teacher conferences, and so teachers are making contact in a virtual type of manner, and Translation Services is really assisting us. Also, Dr. Stanton talked a little bit, we're still doing some changing of schedules because we have some families that have said that they wanted to change schedules. So we were working over the weekend and actually during this week, as well as all office staff in all 32 of our schools, we're doing some changing in schedules. At this point, also this week, 23 of our kids space began opened, and so we have kids space in 23 of our sites. We started with our 4-year-old program in 6-year-old in 6 of our sites. We are still having on-site support. So on-site support is for those students that want to come onto campus. It's not an instructional type of period at that point, but there are support staff there to assist them. So we have on-site support in all 32 of our schools. And as well as we're continuing with our after-school type of academy, and that's the academy. It's also virtual. The students pick up learning type of kits and models every 2 weeks, and then they interact with teachers online. So it's been a very active 3 weeks. I want to commend our staff, and I appreciate every single one of the board members commending the staff, our teachers, our administrators, our classified staff, our bus drivers, nutrition services. Everybody has been a really collaborative effort to begin again during second quarter. Thank you.
Madam President, with the continuation of our COVID-19 update, Mr. Wing will present a human resources update related to COVID-19.
Good evening, Governing Board. Human Resources has done quite a few things regarding planning for the reopening this week. One is we worked with school administration when determining who will be the hybrid in-person teacher versus the virtual teacher. We did have to transfer a few teachers from one school to another. We also had to assign some students from other schools to a virtual teacher who his main campus is at another school. There's been lots of reconciliation in both our student information system and our human resource information system. All along, we've been continuing to monitor class sizes, both the in-person and the virtual. We did streamline a process for schools and the district level to track and place student changes from in-person to virtual. That is so we can consider all of our class sizes throughout the district. We're continuing to assist staff on related benefits to COVID. We're also providing continuous reminders of our safety and health protocols for staff. As of today, the percentage of students who are virtual is around 35%, while in-person hybrid is 65%. I would like to thank Sunburst for allowing me to assist on Monday. It was great to see the staff and students.
Madam President, members of the boards and members of the audience, Academic Services has also been involved in the COVID-19 update. So Mrs. Mora, would you please provide a Academic Services update?
Absolutely, thank you. So as you've heard, we've obviously transitioned to the hybrid this week, which with that meant our teachers had to be prepared for those in-class lessons as well as our distance learning opportunities. Both models are using lessons that have been created by our WESD teachers, and once again, we want to thank those teachers that assisted in the writing of those lessons. It took quite a bit of time, and then for Mrs. McWhorter and her leadership in making sure they were prepared and ready for our teachers for second quarter. The 2 days when students are in person, they're covering about 2 days worth of lessons for our ELA and math, which is quite a bit of content, but we know that we have limited time face-to-face with our students, and we have much work to accomplish. So our teachers have been amazing with the pacing and really helping to get that information to our students. And then on those self-paced days, they are able to then do the reinforcement activities and the follow-up work that helps to reinforce those lessons that they've been working on. Our distance learners then receive instruction 5 days a week, and they are getting, once again, those same lessons. So there's consistency between both platforms. On Wednesday, all of our students are learning virtually. And so at that time, our teachers have an opportunity to work with their entire class and once again, reinforce those skills that they are working on. And then that way providing 5 weeks of instruction for our students, or 5 days of instruction for our students each week. Our gifted program, we are looking at how we provide gifted services for our students. Once again, we want to make sure those are in place. Dr. McIntosh, our gifted coordinator, has met with all of the elementary schools and reached out to get plans for how those teachers are supporting both students that are in distance learning as well as in person, and they've been able to work out schedules that allows them to accommodate both of that. We've also been able to continue work with our Project Potential students, and so if you'll recall in the past, we had students that were not quite identified gifted yet, but they were showing true potential, and they needed those extension activities as well. And we're excited that most of our schools have been able to continue with our distance learning Project Potential students and providing those enrichment activities as well, and as well as the in-person students. We are working on taking a look at the advanced classes at the middle school level. That is one area that we need to do some work with. And so we are in the process of developing some opportunities to increase those academic extensions for our students. Our special education teachers have been amazing. They're working with their students in person as well as in the hybrid model, in the hybrid as well as in the distance learning. They have some of their own Google Classrooms in which they have an opportunity to meet with students individually or in groups. But then they're also supporting our general education teachers as they are working in their classrooms. All of our lessons were designed with extension activities that our general education teachers could provide accommodations for our special education students. But then our resource teachers are supporting that work and making sure the students have what they need. We do have some self-contained programs that are meeting 4 days a week in person versus doing the hybrid. They would be our self-contained academic, functional, developmental, autism, special needs preschool, and our EDP programs. And we offer the 4 days, so that offers a little more consistency and opportunity for our students to come in and receive some of those services that are a little more challenging to do in a distance learning model. So we do have those 4 days a week. We are also looking at special areas for the distance learners. We want to see if we can increase some opportunities for some interactive lessons, some live recorded sessions, in addition to the self-paced work that they are getting right now. So that work is underway, and we are looking into those opportunities. For all of our students, at the beginning of every school year, assessment is a big part of what we do. And especially for now, we need to really know where our students are and where the gaps in learning have occurred since we have had time away from them. So as soon as our students arrived, we started working on the Zello placement testing. This is extremely important testing to identify our students who have English learner needs, and we need to get proper placement and services for them. So our teams are at schools working tirelessly to make sure that they're getting our students assessed properly, so that we can identify where they need to be serviced at. We also will begin Acadians Testing, and this is a K-3 assessment that does screening for our reading needs. And so we'll be working with all of our students on that. And then in November, we'll start moving into our school city, the AZ Mimics, we call them, for ELA and math, and that's going to be for grades 1 through 8. And then we're also looking at a kindergarten math assessment. So once again, to give us that important benchmark data to know where our students are so that we can move forward and make some great decisions. And then in December, we'll be looking at doing some more writing assessments. So as you can imagine, there's some challenges with the distance learners. So we're going to offer lots of tips for our teachers and how we assess students virtually. And then also some of the CDC guidelines. We've been working to have different safety measures in place so that the testing can be done in close proximity with those safety measures in place. So thank you for the opportunity to share our academic services update.
Madam President, members of the board, members of the audience, in continuation with our process, Kathy Thompson, Director of Business Services, will update us related to her functions and COVID-19.
Thank you, Dr. Stanton. A few of the areas that we've been working on the last couple weeks. Number one, the Nutrition Services Department began this week with daily meal servings for both the community and for the students that are at the school sites. So they are serving the hot meals just like they serve for the students on site. That's what they're giving to the parents that are coming in for the community, from the community. They will get a hot meal for lunch and then have something for breakfast for the next morning on a daily basis. That's been going pretty smoothly so far, trying to work around the time frames that we have buses dropping off and we have lunch for the students that they're serving. They're trying to work through those schedules, and it seems to have been going pretty smooth. Also, the leadership team from the Maintenance and Facility Department began this week, after the first couple days, walking the school sites. What they're trying to do, as you recall, we shared with you a few weeks ago the document where we're trying to document the disinfecting and the cleaning that is going on of the high touch areas and things like that in the classrooms and around the campuses. So they began yesterday walking those sites, working with the school site on any areas they see that, just reensuring and verifying that the processes we put in place are being followed so that we can help increase the safety for our students and our staff that are on campus. So they'll be working with the administrators at those sites if they find any areas that they feel need to be addressed. The other area that's been working very effectively recently is trying to make sure that we have devices available for kids. Even while schools have a lot of student devices, Chromebooks out at the kids' homes, there's also a need now that we have kids back at school to possibly have some on site. So they're working on distribution of Chromebooks to the different sites as needed for replacing things that get broken, for new students that are coming in. And yes, we have been getting a few new students, and then also for testing that's coming up for the schools. So we're working through a process on that. They have configured all the new Chromebooks that we received in at the end of August, beginning of September, and now they're ready to be distributed out to sites. Thank you for the chance to update you.
Madam President, members of the board, I'll conclude our presentation and then of course we'll take questions. So if you will, Ms. Tucker, if you'll go ahead and put up the metrics slide. While we're doing that, I do want to, there we go. So I'll start here. Thank you, Ms. Tucker. So if everybody recalls, this is a slide from the Arizona Department of Health. It shows the various models and their terminology: traditional, hybrid, virtual. As you remember, their hybrid says some students in physical buildings and some students in distance learning. Go ahead. Thank you, Ms. Tucker, very much. So if you'll notice right there with the hybrid, which is what we're in, you'll see the yellow area where it says we have to be minimal to moderate, and the hybrid, it talks about the hand hygiene. So in the presentation from Dr. Bailey and Kathy Thompson, you'll notice that they talked about the practicing and then the verification that it is actually occurring of these mitigation strategies. So hand hygiene, using hand sanitizer and hand soap, enhanced cleaning, or what we also call the high touch points, on a regular basis multiple times throughout the day. Proper ventilation, and the board has heard from Mike Kramer many times of how we've worked at proper ventilation throughout our district. The monitoring of absenteeism, a big discussion we've been talking about to make sure we capture absenteeism from our kids. We certainly don't want any kids to be chronically absentee this early in the year. We're doing symptom screening, and if you haven't seen, our teachers are getting very efficient at checking child's temperatures and looking them over as they come in. The physical distancing, the 6 feet, I want to thank the multiple committees and schools that put together procedures. If you haven't seen on many of the schools, they are actually putting up procedures so they can keep a 6 foot of distancing. Cohorting, or the grouping of kids, where the teachers move rather than the kids in many cases. Obviously, Dr. Bailey's presented before in our reopening plan, the field trips and large gatherings are canceled. And finally, our large communal spaces are closed. And these are all strategies that come out of the CDC and the Arizona Department of Health. Next slide, Ms. Tucker. Oh, thank you. By the way, as we're moving down, note at all the current times, there is a mask mandate in place. This was a recent, you got it there, that's fine. Executive Order 2020-51 actually requires masks to be in schools, and there is toward the end of the year currently is what that is mandated by the governor. So our benchmarks for today, first of all, you see that if we were to be in the traditional, it'd be under 5%, what's called PCR, the positivity rate. Our cases at or below 32, which Justin has presented before, the light yellow, and has to do it for more than 2 consecutive weeks. Hybrid, where we are right now, is under 7% PCR, cases at or below 54, dark yellow, and then 2 consecutive weeks or more below. And then, of course, where we were for many weeks, the distance learning would be above 10% PCR, more than 100 cases, and 2 consecutive weeks or more. If you look to the right, you'll see that we're still in the moderate and hybrid with on-site support from the Arizona Department of Health. But if you'll notice at this week's data, where cases went up, so we were at 41.66 last week, we went up to 55.54 as a district. Our percent positivity dropped a little bit, however, from 5.46 to 4.74. And the COVID-like illness, I need to mention that that number is a Maricopa County number, and so you'll see it stayed the same at 3%. So we don't actually have the 2 greens that we need, cases below 32 and the percent positivity below 5. So we are here at this point. We'll keep watching this very closely. As many people have seen, there are cases that appears to be going up in Maricopa County. And I do want to thank again Debbie Halverson and our lead nurses, Debbie and Beth, have been going to many meetings as well. And Maricopa County was very kind to Washington Elementary School District, saying that we're one of the most prepared districts they've seen with our preparation. So we're trying to mitigate anything. And like I mentioned in my previous update, our staff was very thankful that we are using roughly 50% kids, that of the hybrid kids, about 50% are here on Group A and 50% are on Group B. I also was asked a question by a board member recently, do we look at other data? We actually do check zip code data on a daily basis. Joe Alessi in Ms. Thompson's office gives us a regular daily update so we can see if there's any increases on the, obviously that's a little smaller increases on a daily basis, but we do check that as well. And that concludes our COVID-19 update from the BLT, the big leadership team. We're willing to take any questions.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to go ahead and ask Mr. Herrera, you had mentioned you have a comment you'd like to make.
Thank you very much. Paul, I had a question about the, hang on, these things keep moving on. So I had a question on the hybrid, the classroom, some of the classroom sizes, some of the portables. How are we dealing with those portables that, before they had 35, 40 students? Is that we're just cutting them in half and then splitting them days? Is that what you're doing with those?
Mr. Herrera, members of the board, members of the audience. So Mike Kramer has looked at all of the measurements in a room and what we could get to get the 6 feet of distancing. Larry, if you look at it, what we have right now is, and as Justin mentioned, across the district, we're roughly 65% hybrid, and then 35% virtual or online. And so what that does is those virtual kids obviously have come out, or online kids have come out. And so of the remaining kids, We split them up half on the A group and half on the B, and that's where you can get the social distancing in some of those rooms. Obviously, not all of them are 30 by 30. Some of our buildings are older too, not just portables, and so they may be 25 by 25. And so you can't get, you can't get 15 to 17 necessarily in there, and so that's where teachers have moved around bookcases and taken out desks and things like that, so we can, as much as humanly possible, get that 6 feet of distancing. But I will say, Mr. Herrera, one thing that Maricopa County keeps telling us is make sure those kids are wearing those masks and they're hand washing as those mitigation strategies that we really need. But first you take out, so when you think about a classroom of, I always use Lori Fox as my example. She's got 24 in a room, but then 30% come out, that's about 9 kids. So you take those 9 out, now you're talking about 15 kids, and then you split them up over A day and B day. Now you got about 7, 8 kids in each room.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Whaley.
Yep, I have 2 questions. The first question is and I don't know if it would be Dr. Bailey or Miss Mora, but I know that we were having a little bit of trouble when we were first starting to build the schedule around our advanced kids and our gifted kids, and then also making sure that our virtual learners, our remote learners, that 35% we're still getting access to the specials. I know that they're working on that. Can she just talk a little bit more about where they are in that process, and by when they're thinking that they'll be able to get those online kids the same kind of access to things other than just assignments in a room?
So, Madam President, Mrs. Whaley, members of the board, I will be turning over to, that's Mrs. Moore. Thank you for, Mrs. Moore will be answering that. One thing I will say is that because of the scheduling getting worked out now, we are finding gaps in areas where the teachers have openings that we can do that work, but I'll have Lori expand on it right now, because we had to do the balancing, for lack of better words. Ms. Whaley may be familiar with that normally at the beginning of the school year. Obviously, It's kind of like the beginning again. And so, Ms. Moore, do you want to address the gifted advanced learners, I believe it was special areas, and then if I missed anything, please, Ms. Whaley.
Yes, absolutely. As I mentioned in our update, Dr. McIntosh has received a plan from each of the K6, K8 schools on where their gifted teachers are available and how they are providing services for both the online students as well as the hybrid students. So he's working with them. He has been reaching out to the middle school administrators and K administrators once again on those advanced classes. This week was very much just trying to, as Dr. Stanton said, determine how many students we had, where the openings in our teacher schedules were, and then what we can do. So we're working as quickly as possible on that. We obviously don't want time to pass without our students having those opportunities. So I don't want to put a definite date on it, but they are definitely in the process of getting that done as quickly as possible.
How about the special areas, Ms. Mora?
Special areas, same thing. We actually had a meeting today with some administration to talk about what some potential opportunities could be next for our students. And once again, it's that balance of the in-person and distance learning, and we don't want there to be a major discrepancy in what our students are being offered. So we are once again looking at what our teachers' availability is now that we have our numbers and we kind of can see who we have in person with us, and looking at those times in their schedule where now they can potentially offer some other options for the distance learners. And so those interactions with their special area teachers, we are looking into creating some more opportunities for that. And once again, can't put a hard timeline on it, but as soon as possible.
I do appreciate that, because we do have 35% online, and I know you guys are working for that, because those 35% are online are seeing, a lot of their peers are going back to their schools and interacting and getting access to those things. And, so we just want to make sure that their experience is as good as it can be. And I know you all are working on that. So I was just asking, where we were in that process, and, hopefully we can get an update out to families soon as to when they can expect that. So thank you. The second question that I had was probably something for Mr. Wing. I know you kind of talked about adjusting. We keep kind of saying adjusting, and I know that just like at the beginning of the year, you plan that there's going to be 30-something kids in that classroom, and then there turns out to be 15, and then you have to shuffle them around and make sure that each classroom is full, that teachers are being used appropriately. But But I am a little bit concerned. I know that we've had people kind of flip-flopping. You know, I want to be on virtual because I was on hybrid and I want to be virtual. I was on virtual, now I want to be in hybrid. And I know that we're continuing to let people make those choices. My concern is for the staff and the constant upheaval of how many kids are in class, what kids are in their class, if they're going to get new kids, if they're going to get kids from a different place. So I'm just wondering if you can, is there any parameters that we're going to be put around that? Or are we just going to keep adjusting to whatever families want and we're going to let them change 1 week to another?
Well, I don't think the intention is to have changes ongoing back and forth through the rest of the second quarter. Schools and district, we made numerous attempts using different communication strategies before fall break to seek a confirmation from all parents. It didn't happen with all for various reasons. And so this week, the first week we're returning, we are getting some of those changes and requests from parents, and we want to accommodate those requests, and that's what we're kind of living through really every day. It started high on Monday, gradually went down on Tuesday. Again, Wednesday went down even further. So now we're kind of getting more settled as far as the requests. But I don't believe, and Dr. Stanton and Dr. Bailey can maybe assist, but I don't believe it's intended that we're changing back and forth, you know, every day through the rest of the second quarter. So I feel it's going to be settled down after this week, in which we're going to limit it. It is going to be based on class size availability. Because we're accommodating parents this week, there are shifts because we do have to, it goes both ways. If we're adjusting with parent choices, it's going to make staffing changes. If we don't accommodate parents, then we wouldn't have as much. And so we do have that. This week is a kind of challenging week as we transition back in person, along with the virtual for the 35%ers.
So there's no hard stop in terms of, okay, we're only going to take swaps for the first 3, because we're the first week into the second quarter. So there's nothing right now, no discussion around putting a stop to like, okay, people need to make their final selection. And as long as the school's still open in hybrid and you selected hybrid, that's what you're going to be with until third quarter when you can make a change. There's nothing like that. We're just going to keep going with the flow.
I think the intent is that we're not accepting changes after this week. I wouldn't say black and white, no changes at all, because there's some extenuating circumstances we have to consider. Health, for example, of the student, maybe that example consideration. But the intent is we're not after this week. I think we're going to have the high volume changes, and then
Right.
It's going to be very few moving forward. So that will limit our changes after this week.
And for Ms. Whaley
There's
also,
no hard stop on that. Like it's just we're not anticipating anymore. If people need them, we will. So hopefully there's not a lot of flip-flop after the next couple weeks.
well, Ms. Whaley, members of the board, members of the audience, you got to consider we do get new students. We just had some numbers come in actually when you see the new update. Miriam and her team took in, I think it was over 57 or almost 60 kids. So once new kids do come in, we do have to accommodate them. They move into our district, they move into our homes. So when you're looking for an absolute hard, no. But as Justin said, this is the week we're trying to make all the arrangements. We do have a wait list that we did put out a Google form to try to get those held after we got through most of the parent requests. But again, I hope we get a lot more of those students coming back that maybe left the district. And so we have to if they're in our district, we'd make room for those types of situations.
Oh yeah, I anticipated that. I was talking about the current students and how much switching was happening there, but I get it. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you. Then, Mr. Adams, you had a question?
I have a couple. Thank you.
Sure.
Dr. Stan, we talked about we talked about percentages with a hybrid 35% and 65. Can you just real quick give me can you put a number to that as far as students are concerned?
20, Justin, it was like 21,000 kids. So I can do some fast math here, Mr. Adams, or give me a second.
I have it if you want it.
Go ahead, Justin.
So online is about a little over 7,300. In person is about 13,700.
Thank you. I just needed to have a number to it, make it a little bit easier for myself.
It's changing one here, one there, just this week, so, or for the rest of this week probably, but that's gonna be probably the consistent 65-35%.
No, I appreciate it. Just gives me more of a visual. Dr. Standing, with the benchmarks, the positivity, the percent positivity looks like it's going down. So one would say we're looking pretty good in Maricopa County, or at least for our district, let's put it that way. And the cases that keep going up, and the cases per 100,000 people are going up. So one could assume maybe that more people are getting tested. I mean, we don't know why those numbers are going up. What number do we really work off of? Do you work off of the positivity, or do you work off of the cases per 100,000?
Mr. Adams, members of the board, members of the audience, first of all, actually, to your first question, Mr. Adams, then I'll get to the second. Each week, Maricopa County gives us an update, and the nurses, myself, Mrs. Fernandez, we sit through it. And actually, you described it. It appears, again, at least for the most, and this is 2-week-old data, Mr. Adams, but it appears that there are less people testing positive, even though more people were getting tested. They actually demonstrated that in their presentation. So to answer your question, your assumption is right. There are more people being tested. At least 2 weeks ago, the rates were going down. However, if you look closely at the Maricopa County does put up a lot of the Maricopa County trend data on a more frequent basis. Unfortunately, they only give the districts to currently on the Thursday update. But to answer your question, we look at both of them because we need both indicators, actually, Mr. Adams, and so does the state, or Maricopa County. So you see the cases per 100,000 and the percent positivity. You need both of them to be in the same color for 2 weeks or more. So it's not one or the other. It's an and situation. Maricopa County realized the COVID-like illness is a Maricopa-only statistic, so they don't really use that either. But you need both of them to be in the quote-unquote traditional range, or unfortunately going the other way. But if you're looking to move downward, we would need those cases to get below 32 and the percent positivity to remain under 5%.
So thank you, sir. So in this conversation, if the most recent data were in yellow here, we should be in green. If next week one of them is in yellow, that means that we have to, in theory, with what you're saying, go back to virtual. Am I?
Well, wrong color, Mr. Adams. The idea would be right now we are in yellow because of, for example, the cases per 100,000 is in the yellow still. Okay, we went from 41.66 up to 55.54. That went actually up, not down. The percent positivity went from 5.46 to 4.74, so that went down, less than 1%. So you would want to see both of those in the same color. But to go to virtual or online learning again, we'd have to be above 10%. So we're at 4.74, roughly 5. So that would be quite a bit of a jump. There are some.
I'm sorry, is it 10 or 7, sir?
The hybrid is from 5 to 7. The distance learning starts at 10. We obviously would have to watch, Mr. Adams, very closely the between 7 and 10, because that's kind of a little bit, they didn't mark it, that Justin calls it the dark yellow area. We would watch that very closely because the state did not determine what was the 7 to 10 directly, but we would watch it very closely. Obviously, we'd be looking at anything in between 7, 7.5, 8, 8.5, 9 type of thing.
So if I'm understanding correctly, the positivity is what's driving us, based on what you're telling me.
Well, if the cases per 100,000 doesn't get down to level, if you notice, for like you mentioned, the red, we'd have to be more than 100 cases. Right now, we're not very close to that, but to get to traditional, it's got to be below 32. We're not there. We're off by 25 almost. Yeah.
I apologize because it's hard, without seeing the other coded matrix. It is a tad confusing, so I apologize. I'm just trying to get my arms around it, and I can talk to you more offline. But if I'm a little confused, the public may be confused also. So, but
look at two of the same colors like right now, and don't look at the last one, the COVID likeness. That's, again, it's put up because it's Maricopa. But if you look at those two right there, they would have to be in the same color. And right now you can see one's in the yellow, one's in the green. That means we're in yellow. So the color of the, I don't know what you want to call it, you know, the next one up is actually the one you'd have to follow. And that's how Maricopa does it.
Okay.
So I would look at
So-
the top two.
So it looks like we're good to go in theory, trending. We're probably good to go for a couple of weeks unless something dramatic happens.
Well, I've had a hard time, Mr. Adams, and my BLT team will tell you I haven't predicted very well because I've tried to say, oh, I think it's going to move up, down, and I have been completely wrong. So wouldn't want to make a prediction.
Oh, you're wonderful. Thank you, sir. The last question I have is, so right now we take a child's temperature when they come to the classroom or before they enter the facility?
Mr. Adams, members of the board, members of the audience, we take it when they get to their homeroom, although the kids go through various mitigation strategies. They have to follow certain arrows and things like that and stay 6 feet apart. But the actual, somebody else is, let me see that, hold on. Mr. I'm sorry about that, but so the kids have to stay when they're dropped off, picked up. There's mitigation strategies to keep them separate, walk in a certain pattern, but we actually check it when they get to the homeroom.
And if a child shows positive, and forgive me, so that we do the best we can to keep them separated through the mitigation process.
Mm-hmm.
But in theory, a child that is infected is going through those hallways.
Mr. Adams, members of the board, members of the audience, they would have to have a mask on. They would have to hand wash, and then when they get there, their temperature would be checked at the classroom, and then immediately, if their temperature is, elevated, that could be because they ran to school, that type of thing. But then, if temperature were higher, above 100.4, we would actually then have them go to the health tech at the office, and they would check it again, and if they were, we would actually then call their families if they have symptoms of COVID-19.
So I really appreciate your answers, and Madam Chair, that's all I had. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Yannicki.
Thank you. And I kind of had the same questions, some of the same ones Mr. Adams did, in terms of, obviously the COVID-like illness really doesn't do anything for us if it's just counting. So I've been looking each week. I know sometimes I send it to you and you've already looked, but I look at other districts. So are they saying essentially that there's increased testing of people, and because more people are testing again than they were a couple months ago, that's why it's trending that way in these other districts? Because it appeared to me almost all of them are around us were like that.
Mr. Yannicki, members of the board, members of the audience, I can't speak for the testing. They don't mention by school district. They do mention it by the county. And in today's presentation, they talked about we are testing more people again, whereas before there seemed to be less. It seems to be an increasing tendency. More school districts and businesses are starting to test. So they're testing more, but it appears that the positivity rate is lower. But I can't tell you by school district. What I will tell you, since you and I, Mr. Yannicki, did talk, there are districts around us. Glendale L, who example is up. And so that affects Glendale Union because we are part of both of them and things like that. So there are districts that are up. We didn't see too many down this week. They were mostly up a little bit in either cases or the percent positivity.
Okay, I just think it makes it really difficult for us because some of it seems kind of random. It just doesn't seem like, and I guess part of that's because it's old data. We don't get it in real time. We're always, 7 days back or more?
Mr. Yannicki, members of the board, members of the audience, it's a 2-week rolling average.
14 days back. Okay. Because the state's showing, one of my concerns with, as Mr. Adams was saying, we're starting to trend right. One of my concerns statewide is that positivity. I follow that positivity rate, and that was at over 9% now, or close to 9%. Yeah. So that's what I'm worried about. I know that's different places, and they all have their own different concerns and issues. I'm excited we're hybrid, but one of the things I don't want to talk about specific places because that would, that's not productive, but I'm seeing a fatigue, a coronavirus fatigue where people are just kind of letting up a little bit. And I don't think we should all be, stuck at home, not doing anything, but I definitely think we need to do what we can, like, as you said, mitigate some of these concerns.
Mr. Yannicki, members of the board, members of the audience, and I appreciate the board's support. We have made a decision, hybrid, literally 50% of the kids. Again, first of all, you have the kids in virtual, but 50% of the kids on A and then 50% of the kids on B. Not everyone is doing that, but for the safety of our staff and students, Washington is. We are, you just heard in the presentation, I mean, Mike Kramer's team has really worked hard at making sure our facilities hit those high touch points, and that we're checking all of those areas. And so, you know, they call them mitigation strategies for a purpose, Mr. Yannicki. You can't guarantee anything, but you can mitigate as much as possible, and that's what we're doing, being able to get the 6 feet of distancing, hand washing, and the mask mandate as in particular. Yeah, statewide, a lot of the rural counties are starting to see the impact like the central United States is, kind of a similar pattern that, you know, where it wasn't before, it seems to be spreading.
I'm sorry about that, obviously, but thank you for the reports, and thank you, Mrs. Lambert, for letting me ask a couple questions. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Dr. Stanton, as we go along here, it can be confusing, and I do, in my work, I see the scores from everywhere else and what is going on, and have been part of the discussions. And what Mr. Yannicki was saying is, it is confusing when you read the newspaper about things being so high. But what it has shown is that the counties that really didn't go through a first wave, such as Graham County, Greenlee County, Yuma, La Paz, that's where some of those high numbers are. And even in Maricopa County, there's little hot spots. If you go to the website and you look at Maricopa County, you'll see red areas around. We fortunately are not that. And I so appreciate us following and making decisions based on health first, and working and trying to give our families choices. Not all students do well virtually, so they do so much better in just even the experience of, I call it a block scheduling or AMV, being able to provide that, and that's unique. Other districts are just opening it up, and they could end up having, you know, 21 to 25 kids in a classroom, while the teachers are trying to teach their students virtually as well at the same time they're teaching the students in their classroom. And that's exhaustive on teachers. That is such a hard thing to do. And that adds to the stress. And in saying that, we've talked about students coming to school sick. And now that it's the allergy season, there's a lot of kids that are coming with the sniffles. Some of the symptoms of COVID are a variety of different everyday ailments, you know, allergies, cold, flu, asthma. And so just because we need to send students home because they have one symptom doesn't mean we're having a COVID outbreak. But how is the staff being tested? Because we have adults in our buildings as well as children. Not only do children come to school sick, our staff may also be vulnerable to that. How are we watching them, or when they come on campus, what do they do?
I might have Dr. Bailey speak to it a little bit more, but I know that at all campuses, they're also checking the staff temperatures when they enter the campus. We do the same thing here at the district office. Before they enter, we have a handheld non-touch thermometer that people check their temperatures. We do ask people to check before they leave home, but we're also checking it when they get here. And then of course we do a symptom scan like we do with others. So we're trying to also mitigate at the gate, for lack of better words, those symptoms.
Okay. Did Dr. Bailey need to add anything more, or did you pretty well cover that?
Dr. Bailey, anything else for you? Anything else you can think of from the school campus level? Because Mrs. Lambert asked at the campus level for the staff.
Right. I did hear that. We have temperature checks at in all of the school offices, and so if the staff member wasn't able to check their temperature at home, then they have the opportunity to check their temperature at the in the offices. We asked them to go through the same symptom check that we ask students to go through with their families, and so and I will tell you that staff members have been very vigilant about really really putting those precautions in, because they want to be safe with with their students, and they want to be safe with each other. So I really do appreciate the staff really embracing all of the safety and health precautions that we put in.
I think it probably reassures everybody when you're coming on campus and doing things. I know just having to go out into the public myself, you worry about the others that are there, and people who are going out and doing their daily lives don't always stop and check themselves to see how they're doing. And that's how it can be exposed to others. I didn't ask this ahead of time, but I did want to question that maybe you could provide us in the next report, or just let us know. I know that where I work, there is a real crisis in substitutes. And I didn't know how Washington was handling that. Do we have substitutes that we can call, or are we just relying on staff at schools to support each other if there's an absence?
I'll turn that over to Mr. Wing, although I did see an email from him talking about other ways we can work on that. Justin, you want to give an update now, and then maybe in the future we can add to it?
Sure, we'll certainly add to Mrs. Lambert. Before the board meeting, I had actually emailed a few with some options that we need to consider, because we do have a shortage of substitutes. I think most districts do. You never have enough, particularly when the economy is going decent and whatnot. Just in general, pre-COVID, there are a couple things that we did apply. We have emergency certified, sub-certified, about 30 paraprofessionals in our school system. And the governing board did approve, if you recall, I don't know, maybe 2 months back, that we would provide them extra or higher hourly rate, $5 more per hour, if they were to substitute for a class. Keep in mind, paraprofessionals already have to have an AA degree, 60 college credits, or a passing of a state-approved paraprofessional exam. And it wasn't for all paraprofessionals, those who just had that readiness on campus. We still have some substitutes that we are leveraging, but as I stated earlier, we can never have enough, so we need to continue to explore all options. And if the audience knows of anybody who's interested in being a sub, we are accepting applications.
Yes, all hands on deck. We need help. I'll go back around. Do board members have any other additional questions they'd like to ask?
So Dr. Stanton, explain that one more time about the positivity. Just kidding.
It's the opposite of negativity. No. Well, then, hearing no further questions, Dr. Stanton and team, I so appreciate the report and keeping us informed, and your hard work that you have done to make this to be the best experience that we can have with our students and our staff. It's a heck of a balancing act to try and, in respect for our teachers and respect for our families, to meet their needs. So I really do appreciate everything that is going forward, and you're right, we're still building this ship while we're flying it or floating it, whatever we're doing. But that's how we learn. And we're well prepared, and I appreciate the flexibility that will help us as this pandemic moves on, however it moves on, that I think we're in a good position to have to step back and go virtual if we have to come back when the crisis is over and be able to resume. I mean, watching other districts and how they operate, the fatigue that Mr. Yannicki was talking about is critical. Our families, our staff are all suffering from all. So just respecting each other, being kind to each other, and helping us get through it is that we're going to do. And I so appreciate the hard work that you have done in supporting our schools. So we'll move on to our next. Does board members, we're going on to 7 future reports and agenda items. Board members, are there any requests for future reports or agenda items? Okay. Then next online is that we'll do a call for executive session. So if I could have a motion to recess the regular meeting for executive session, I'd appreciate
So
it.
moved.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'll second.
Thank-
I'm going to make
I'll
history.
second.
Mrs. Whaley seconded. This is the first time in board history I haven't done a motion or a second since
Oh,
2009.
well, the night's not over.
Well, I know.
Okay.
I'm just saying. I'm just being a historian.
Oh, okay.
Lorinda will be happy.
Then we will go ahead and vote on recessing the regular meeting and going into executive session. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And we will do so. I will remind board members that we got a new new link for the executive session right before the board meeting, a couple of hours before the board meeting. That's what you'll need to do. So you'll need to leave this meeting, go into the other link for our executive session, and then we'll return to go ahead and close out for this. Thank you, everyone.
Do we have a 5-minute?
Well, it's 8:40, so let's come back at 8:45. Okay? All right. Hearing no complaints, we'll do that. So see you at 8:45 in the other room. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
I was really hoping you guys were gonna get back here a little faster.
Yeah, I left a little sooner, but it made me feel better.
Oh, well, good. As long as you feel good, that's important.
We're done with everything though.
Gotcha. Hey, Nikki. Oh, I guess I can take my mask off, huh?
All right.
Let me pull this up.
The only one I don't see Miss Tucker is Miss Lambert yet. Looks like everybody else came over.
Okay, we are live, so we can wait a couple seconds, or we can have Mr. Adams make the motion. We have a quorum.
I'll respect Mrs. Lambert. I'm sure she'll be on in a minute.
Okay, sure. Yeah, everybody's here. Miss Tucker, I'm going to put Miss Lambert on via telephone. She's having a hard time with the link. Go ahead, Miss Lambert.
Okay, we'll reconvene the regular meeting. And the next item on the agenda is a move to adjourn. Could I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Larry. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Whaley. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? All right, then we are adjourned at 10:02. Thank you, everyone, for the good discussion.
Good night.
We will
Have
see
a
you.
good weekend, everybody.
Yes, and to Nikki and Aaron, good luck in the upcoming election. And this is set after the adjournment.